Hi there, I'm Mr. Doyle, and this is a great undertaking. On this channel, I am exclusively discussing all the works of Stephen King and the endless adaptations across every imaginable medium for which they have been used and abused, according to the order of the original book or story's publication. In this series, we will be diving into King's novel The Shining and everything that comes with it, which turns out is a lot. This series includes 6 videos. This video, which is for the 1977 novel, and also includes a segment for before the play and after the play, the original prologue and epilogue from the novel that was omitted from the original publication. The next video in the series will be about the 1980 Kubrick film, as well as the 2012 conspiracy theorist wet dream entitled Room 237, which relates to Kubrick's film. There's also a video for the 1997 3-episode TV miniseries, one for the sequel novel to The Shining, which is entitled Dr. Sleep, which came out nearly 4 decades later in 2013. There's a video for not 1, not 2, but 3 musical theater adaptations and the 2016 opera adaptation. All things I didn't know existed, but of course they do. And finally, a video for the 2019 movie adaptation of Dr. Sleep. In each of my video series so far, I have included a hidden clip of me doing something self-debasing or dumb, yet somehow relevant to the story I am discussing. And for this series, I will be reenacting the famous "Here's Johnny" scene from the 1980 movie. A scene that was not in the book, but whatever. I do what I want. This is my channel. Don't tell me what to do. I'm also all about poorly put together minimal effort costumes on this channel, so for this series I will be donning my finest Jack Torrance apparel, which, as it turns out, is essentially my normal clothing. Something I had not realized until planning this series, so I'm gonna wear some of my regular clothes and pretend that it's a costume. Alright, so I just put on one of my flannel shirts and a thrift store jacket. Low budget costume complete. Synopsis as provided within the novel. The Overlook Hotel claimed the most beautiful physical setting of any resort in the world, but Jack Torrance, the new winter caretaker with his wife Wendy and their 5-year-old son Danny, saw much more than its splendor. Jack saw the Overlook as an opportunity, a desperate way back from failure and despair. Wendy saw this lonely sanctuary as a frail chance to preserve her family, and Danny, who was blessed or cursed with a shining, precognitive gift, saw visions hideously beyond the comprehension of a small boy. He sensed the evil coiled within the Overlook's 110 empty rooms, an evil that was waiting just for them. History and inspiration. The Shining is King's 4th published novel if you count Rage, which was his first publication under the pen name Richard Bachman. Make sure to watch my video for that one. It's a real fun time and not at all a total bummer of a video. Anyway, after his first 2 published novels were based in small Maine towns, places familiar to King, he decided he wanted a change of pace for his next novel, so he sought inspiration elsewhere. After grabbing a map, he picked Boulder, Colorado completely at random, and so off King and his wife Tabitha went to Colorado. I just want to take a moment to imagine what it must be like to just grab a map and decide to go a place and just go. That sweet, sweet carry cash would have just started flowing in at this time for King after years of living in poverty, so he could suddenly afford to go jet-setting around at will. Wish I could do that. That's it. I'll pick up my new novel entitled Mary. It is not at all a blatant ripoff of a well-known book and is an entirely original concept, so I can go do fun shit and stop being poor. The Overlook Hotel in The Shining was inspired by an actual hotel in Estes Park named the Stanley, which is about an hour from Boulder. King and his wife Tabitha stayed there during their trip, and they were the only couple in the hotel during their stay. It was the end of the season and the hotel was preparing to close down, so the huge hotel was vacant aside from the King's. In an interview, King recalled the vast empty hallways he wandered at night and the extravagant dining room being set for just the two of them while the other tables around them sat empty. Turns out King chose wisely in regards to the location, and the seeds of inspiration were planted. In addition to the Stanley, King drew inspiration from Shirley Jackson's novel The Haunting of Hill House, Edgar Allan Poe's short stories The Fall of the House of Usher and The Mask of the Red Death, and Robert Marasco's novel Burnt Offerings. King also pulled from his own experiences with alcoholism, anger issues, and fatherhood when creating the character Jack Torrance. The overview. The Shining is a story of a family on the brink. Facing potential marital and inevitable financial ruin, they look to make a big change in hopes to rescue themselves from a desperate situation. Jack Torrance has one last chance to make things right, and what seems like a step in the right direction turns out to be anything but. The family is determined to make things work, but they face incredible and otherworldly odds that none of them could have anticipated. Well, none of them except for Danny, of course, but Danny's just a child who can't fully comprehend the warnings that only he is receiving, and he is hesitant to tell his parents for fear they will think he is losing his marbles. The family inevitably ends up stranded at the Overlook, where they struggle to maintain their sanity and eventually their lives as the hotel's autocorrect strikes again. As the hotel's other occupants pit them against each other and work to claim Danny as their own. The protagonists. Jack Torrance is in the midst of a difficult course correction as he tries to save himself and his family from himself. Jack's story is one of second chances and seeking redemption. He is a man on course to repeat the mistakes of his abusive alcoholic father and ultimately doom his marriage. But due to a series of eye-opening events, he becomes determined to defeat his inner demons, and he seems to be succeeding. That is until the Overlook gets its hooks in him, at which point he is utterly helpless to fight against the manipulative evil therein that preys upon his insecurities and exploits his weaknesses. Wendy Torrance, wife to Jack and mother to 5-year-old Danny, is a loving wife and mother, but there is only so much of her husband's irresponsible and traumatic behavior she can take. Just as Wendy is preparing to leave Jack, he convinces her to give him 1 week to reform, and Jack is able to curtail their separation. Wendy is no pushover, however, and she remains skeptical of her husband, keeping a close eye on him to ensure he doesn't backslide into his old ways. She genuinely loves and cares about Jack, but she refuses to tolerate any further abuse or belligerence from him. During the family's stay at the Overlook, we come to understand that Wendy would do anything to protect her son, and that includes taking drastic measures when faced with the reality that Jack is becoming more unhinged than ever before. That brings us to Danny Torrance, son to Jack and Wendy, and a telepathic lightning rod who can read minds, hear thoughts, and see things that others cannot. Jack and Wendy believe their son to be simply intuitive and bright for his age, and it's not until much later, much too late, that they fully realize what Danny is capable of and what psychic consequences Danny may now face while at the mercy of the Overlook's cursed inhabitants. The antagonists. The Overlook itself is an imposing adversary that is filled with the evil remnants of the past atrocities that have happened within its walls. Grisly murders, gangland violence, suicide. The Overlook has seen it all, and like the Marston House from King's previous novel, Salem's Lot, the Overlook has, in King's words, become a psychic sounding board. The hotel has seemingly absorbed the souls of the victims that died there, and now they wait in a sort of purgatory to manipulate, exploit, and ultimately absorb those who are most susceptible into their ranks. In addition to the hotel and the apparitions within, it is Jack Torrance who, after a steady descent into madness, transforms from loving, repentant father to a crazed lunatic that terrorizes Wendy and Danny after succumbing to the hotel's will. It's not often we are given the opportunity to see a story's central character shift so wildly, but King once again shows what sets him apart from his contemporaries by taking such an unorthodox approach. Final thoughts. This book tackles and touches on such a wide variety of subjects that it's impressive how coherent it manages to be. From psychic abilities to alcoholism, haunted houses, cyclical familial abuse, marital problems, the ghosts of the past, this book is all over the place, and yet somehow it all ties together to create one of King's most beloved stories. This is a book I've come back to on numerous occasions and have enjoyed for years, and for those of you who haven't read it, it's a must and a great introduction to King's work. Before the play and after the play, original prologue and epilogue. Before the play was the original prologue of The Shining, but it was cut from the book prior to publication. The prologue was later published by Stuart Schiff in Whispers magazine in 1992, and an abridged version was published in TV Guide when King's miniseries version aired on TV in 1997. The prologue would later be included in the 2017 Cemetery Dance special edition of The Shining as well. The prologue provides us with an up-close look at some of the Overlook's history, a lot of which is briefly touched on in the novel. It's a more in-depth history of the hotel's origins and exploration of the man who built the Overlook, as well as those who would go on to take over ownership and the hotel's early victims. I genuinely enjoyed the history lesson, but at the same time, I'm glad that the prologue was removed from the story's publication. It would have given away far too much to any first-time readers, and similarly to Carrie, King would have revealed far too much too early on. Before the Play is a great read for anyone who has already read The Shining, and there are some links in the descriptifier below for both the text and audio versions, should you desire to check it out. As for the epilogue after the play, I was unable to find anything online other than some folks on Reddit describing it as a series of newspaper articles that covered the aftermath of the Torrance family at the hotel. Also, I was unable to purchase the 2017 special edition so that I could read it for myself, as it goes for hundreds of dollars used, and I'm not so much a collector as I am a reader, and also I can't afford it, so there is that. Alright, that does it for this episode. Check out the next video in this series, which is all about the 1980 Stanley Kubrick film version of The Shining, as well as the documentary Room 237. Kubrick's film has been notoriously criticized by King and is simultaneously regarded as one of the greatest horror films of all time. It is also one of the most hyper-analyzed films ever, which is on full display in Room 237. That should be a fun one. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty please, with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.